Again, simply explaining more about mind control via brain imbalance, let's look at the other structures of the brain. We're talking about the neocortex, which is supposed to be the executive command function of the brain. It's supposed to be the command center of the brain. This is where we're supposed to be guiding our actions from. When there's a specific form of brain imbalance, one of the other two complexes within the brain exerts what you could probably just simplify and call executive control. In other words, this other complex within the brain sort of takes over and becomes the ruler of the individual, when in fact it's not supposed to be acting in that capacity. It's supposed to be acting when it's needed, okay? And it's supposed to be in balance. These two other parts of the brain are supposed to be in balance with each other. And when one side of the neocortex goes into a form of chronic imbalance, we'll see, one of these other parts of the brain become chronically dominant among the whole triune part of the brain, the whole triune complexes within the brain. So these three complexes are the human brain, the mammal brain, and the reptile brain. And all of them are important. None of them should be downplayed. They're all necessary for our growth and development and interaction here in the physical form. This is what we need to understand. It's not about destroying any parts of these complexes of the brain. It's about using them in their proper aspect, in their proper role. And again, this is the temple, the so-called Temple of Solomon. That's why you always see 3 stages to any initiatory mystery traditions. It's a reflection of these 3 parts. It's a reflection of the 3 components of consciousness: thought, emotion, and action. Thought, governed in the higher order thinking of the human brain. Emotions, largely governed in the limbic system, the mammal brain, the mammalian brain. And then action, movement, survival instinct, governed by the R complex. All necessary components to function and to express consciousness. None of them should be the 2 lower parts of the brain should not be chronically dominant. So let's explain how they become chronically dominant. They're there to perform a vital function, but they're not to rule the house. The house needs to be ruled by the human brain in a state of balance, the higher brain, the neocortical brain, or what is actually really known as the telencephalon. But that's the whole gray matter part of the brain up on top. The neocortex is actually the outer area in which neural activity largely takes place. So when the left side of the brain is in a state of chronic imbalance, what happens is the limbic brain, the mammalian brain, the brain that governs emotions, is shut down. That's why a dominator doesn't have any compassion or emotions. The part of the brain that actually sends out the chemicals and the neuropeptides that help us to experience emotion in the physiology is not working properly. It is basically largely shut down. It becomes suppressed. So chronic left brain or masculine dominance creates suppression of emotion and eventually roots us into the reptile brain. The executive command function center of the brain stops being the higher brain. It stops being the human brain or the neocortex, and those command functions get rerouted. And now we're being ruled by the R complex or the reptile brain. That's what a dominator becomes like, a reptile. Instinct, action only, survival, my way, hoarding, authority. I'm going to take what I want because I can. I'm going to do what I want to because I can. This is somebody who's sick in the left brain. They're trapped in the left brain. They've been firewalled off from the other half of themselves, the sacred feminine component. They've been cut off from their emotional qualities because the actual limbic brain is damaged. It's not functioning electrically properly. It's like a computer that part of the logic board is broken. It's not going to function properly. These people are ill. They're sick. They literally have brain damage. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that metaphorically. It's physical brain damage that is provable. So what happens in the opposite instance? What if the right brain hemisphere is chronically dominant? What happens in these three major structures within the brain, these three complexes? Again, this is a very simplified model. The brain's actual operation is a lot more complex than this. But in general, this holds true. I'm not telling you this is all there is to know about neuroscience. I'm telling you this is the most important thing to know about neuroscience because it generally gets the picture of how the brain operates in a big way to people. And yes, this does hold true, and this is how the qualities of the brain function together with each other. When the right hemisphere is chronically dominant, the opposite happens. Okay? The same thing happens in the sense that the neocortex stops acting as the executive command functions of the brain, the command center of the brain, as it is intended to be when it is in a state of balance. When the right brain hemisphere is chronically imbalanced, and that's where, the only functions that we're using, we're not using the left brain, the R complex loses its power. That's what becomes suppressed. So the survival instinct is suppressed, the person won't stand up for themselves or their rights, and the kind of executive function of the brain gets shunted to the limbic brain, or the emotional part of the brain. And this person becomes ruled by fear. They become ruled by their emotions. It's the kind of person who will take offense to everything you try to tell them. It's the kind of person who gets scared real easily at the first thing that they hear that's unpleasant. The person that doesn't want to look at unpleasantries taking place in the world. They think that by ignoring them or putting their head in the sand, somehow that's magically going to go away. They bought the New Age, total New Age bullshit notion that, by paying attention to something and becoming aware of its existence, you're somehow magically giving it power over you. Which is total nonsense and could not be further from the truth. So the chronic right-brained dominance, the feminine side of the brain, creates the suppression of our survival instinct. And it eventually roots us in the mammalian brain, in which we are ruled by our emotions. And you'll notice, if we're ruled in either one of these other centers, these other complexes of the brain, either the reptile complex or the limbic brain, what are you largely incapable of doing? Thinking clearly with the higher part of the brain that governs higher order thinking. So you're never going to understand patterns that are taking place. You're not going to know what's going on within you because part of you is broken and needs healing that you can't even see physically. It's not a physical injury, but it is a physical injury. It's not a physical injury that's easily seen because it's inside the head, in the brain. And because people know nothing about how the brain works, they don't understand the majority of people are walking around with brain damage. And I'm not saying that metaphorically or symbolically. I'm saying that very literally. So we don't want to be ruled by either part of the brain, because when the left brain is chronically dominant, the person becomes somebody who thinks that they're a master of other people. I call this master think. And when the right brain is chronically imbalanced, you end up with a population that won't stand up for their rights. They don't have enough self-respect. They don't care about themselves enough to say, no, this is wrong. It's not going to continue, even if it comes to the point where I have to use physical force to stop this. And that's called a willing slave, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody who will not stand up for their rights is a willing slave. I don't care why you're doing it, whether just because you're a coward and you can't develop conscience, you're ruled by the emotional part of the brain, and you don't have any true self-respect to stand up for yourself and say no. And that's what the New Age movement is all about, making more people like that. That's why they want to propagate it as the New World religion, because they want people in this slave-think mindset to accept slavery and to accept other people as their rightful masters. And you need to see no more evidence of this. Go to a New Age expo. I don't care where the New Age expo is in your area, just go to it and ask the people there, do you think government is legitimate? The concept of government. And almost every single person will say yes, because they're good little willing order-following slaves who don't understand their sovereignty and think that they're spiritual, think that they've come into some spiritual knowledge because they can sit in a lotus position and meditate for 4 hours a day. Well, that isn't real spirituality. Real spirituality deals with freedom. And anybody who is a so-called self-help person, a so-called guru, a so-called New Age teacher that is not teaching people that the goal of spirituality is true freedom, sovereignty, and a balance between the brain hemispheres, understanding both the non-aggression principle and the principle of self-defense, is no teacher at all. They are a deceiver. They are either a dupe who has bought a deception and is now propagating it unknowingly because they're not in a place of true knowledge, and you shouldn't listen to them if you have any discernment. Or they're a direct deceiver who's peddling this bullshit deliberately to try to deceive other people and turn them into people who have slave-think operating inside of them. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. This brain imbalance toward one brain hemisphere or another, this is slide number 7 now, is the goal and the dream of the dominators of this world, of the occultists. So I want to just tell you a brief story. When I was involved in Satanism, and I was attending satanic rituals at different locations, largely in Pennsylvania and Maryland, some of the higher level Satanists, or what you might call Luciferians, I don't know if they were that high up in the hierarchy, but people who were like, whose house the ritual was at, or, friends, good friends of them, or people who were coming in to be a guest and, witness the activities of the grotto, were telling people that they were very influential in the publishing community for the New Age. And telling people, wait until you see the information, and I'm talking about, we're talking about here the mid-1990s. The mid-1990s. Telling people about all the books and all the information that they were going to be publishing and peddling through the so-called New Age movement. And they said, we're behind this. We're doing this because it's pushing people into the form of imbalance that we want to push them into. I didn't understand it at the time because I was still in their minds. I was still in the mini-me satanic mindset. This form of Satanism that is pushed to the public. Again, it's a recruiting center. It's recruiting grounds for psychopaths, for people who have psychopathic tendencies. Which at that time, I would admit I did have tendencies toward becoming a secondary psychopath. My brain was messed up before I was able to heal it. And they were telling some people in side conversations after the ritual, because somebody brought up what New Agers think and believe, and openly telling people, we're responsible for a lot of that material. We're putting it out there. And I believe them because they said, wait until you see what will be coming out in the next few years. We are going to give people completely erroneous notions of the laws of attraction. We're going to give people completely erroneous notions of how people create their reality, because they know how this works. They know natural law. They know how it works. See, these are people who are so hateful of the fact that natural law exists. They look at it, their worldview is, we're in a prison because we can't do whatever we want unchecked completely. We want to be able to kill, rape, pillage, murder with no consequence to us at a soul level or even in the physical domain. No consequence. That's their goal. Their goal is we want to be God. We want to be the creator. They're trying to usurp the position of the creative force in the universe by taking down natural law and replacing it with their law. That's what the Luciferians and the Satanists are attempting to do. They want to topple natural law. And they're actually very successful and very close to being able to do that, which is why I don't underestimate these individuals at all. And I have respect for them as an enemy. And so should everybody else, because they're the most intellectual people walking in the world. While I wouldn't say that they have true intelligence, so few people do on either side of the spiritual battle, they are very intellectual and very well-read individuals, and they do understand natural law. They know that it's in place and how it works. And that's why they're trying to insulate themselves from the consequences, because they're trying to become God. And they do that by getting other people to carry out their behavior for them. They don't actually do the action. And therefore the karmic brunt of the consequences is not theirs. Again, people need to understand who bears the brunt of moral culpability, the order giver or the order follower. Well, these Satanists, more likely than not, never actually did physical harm to someone else. They're getting other people to do that dirty work for them. And hence why they call the military and the police their dogs, because they're on the chain and following the command. They'll sit when they tell them to sit, they'll speak when they tell them to speak, eat when they tell them to eat, attack when they tell them to attack. Therefore, they consider them their animals, their pets. They're two phrases that Satanists in my presence, when I was involved with this, called the military were our pets and our dogs. That's it. Never referred to them as military men, military women, never referred to them as the armed forces, never. Our dogs. Never said the police department, the police forces, the law enforcement officers, never once referred to them as any of those things. They called them our dogs, because that's what they think of people who do that job. They are our order-following dogs. We have them well-trained. And also told me, you think you're going to tell people and they're going to accept that from you? They said if we came forward and told them that we're their owners, they wouldn't accept it from us. That's how perfectly programmed they are. And they're right. They were right. I can admit when I'm wrong. I'm telling you, they told me exactly what the truth was. So in a way, I don't really have a lot of built-up anger and resentment and hostility toward them, okay, because they are honest about what they're doing. They're very honest. It's a lot different than a person who says, I think I'm doing the right thing, and yet they're carrying out the work of these psychopaths, these madmen. I have a lot more bitterness and resentment against those people because they have the gall and the audacity to say they're doing something that's right. And they don't know the first thing about right. To somebody with a totally black, sick heart that wants to do evil and is telling people the truth about how they're doing it, I actually have quite a bit more respect. And guess what? I don't really care what you think about that. I don't care whether you think I'm wrong for thinking that way. I can respect that level of unity in consciousness. So I don't have a lot of ill will against them or want to see anything bad happen to them because they're not the ones who are doing it. They're not the ones taking the action. The police are. They're the ones who are following these lunatics' orders. Because they're in a state of chronically imbalanced brain hemispherical action. They're both imbalanced in the left and the right brain because the police want to follow orders. That's right brain imbalance. They're in balance in the right brain as well as the left. Their brain's just totally destroyed. They want to be somebody's master, but they're someone else's slave at the same time. And that's what evil really wants. They want everybody to be a master and a slave simultaneously because they just want the perpetuation of master-slave think. In one form or another, they want the perpetuation of slavery. So these people told people in these grottos that we are going to be putting forward tons of deception. We're going to flood the market with deception about these concepts so that people can't discover the truth about them. And they did it. They didn't just say that they were going to do it, they did it. And I'll bet you they threw a lot of this information right into people's hands and say, here, put this out. This is what people want to hear. You'll make a killing. You'll make a ton of money doing it. They were behind it. Guaranteed. Guaranteed a lot of these New Age gurus who write all this crap that they write, they're not even really writing it themselves. They've been given the idea, like a planted a seed, and then, the dark occultist steps back into the shadow after giving them the idea, and then they pen the deception. That's how it works. But they said that there would be a huge, massive influx in New Age thought that was a total deception, telling people erroneous notions about how the laws of attraction work and how basically creating your reality work. And people have swallowed it hook, line, and sinker, and they need a hose and a funnel to shovel it down the gullet fast enough. That's how naive these people are. Which it always makes me laugh hilariously when people call me a New Ager. I don't know what you're listening to. You're in the Twilight Zone or something. You know what it is? It's what I call the 5-second commenter. They watch 5 seconds of a video clip about something that I said, immediately related in their mind, have never listened to one podcast in its entirety, and then boom, let me make my ill-informed comment from this completely erroneous thin slice, because I don't have a brain that recognizes patterns, so I'm going to actually look at this tiny little 5-second or 30-second thin slice, and I'm going to say I know everything there is to know about everything this individual has ever said and call him a New Ager as a result. It's a bunch of clowns. A bunch of total clowns who don't know how to think. And think they know something when they know exactly nothing.